2 hours ago, the procurement director slapped a red inspection notice on my restaurant's front door, accusing me of selling illegal fish. I had 6 hours to prove my seafood was authentic before the health inspectors returned. I collected samples from my kitchen and from his warehouse, sending them to the university lab for DNA testing. The back dining room, usually quiet at this hour, buzzed with tension. The letter, dated March 11th, lay between the cracked vinyl placemats. It detailed the accusations with exact timestamps and references, but cited a lab report I hadn't seen, supposedly confirming contamination. My weathered hands traced the edges of the letter, my silver strands falling loose as I read. This was Greer's move. His procurement director leaked the accusation to the local press hours before the licensing renewal hearing in 30 days. My reservations, worth roughly $4,000 a week, had already dropped sharply. Outside, the hum of gossip grew louder. Whispers about tainted fish and impending shutdowns floated down the alley. I stood and moved toward the window, folding my arms over my worn apron. Local fishermen depend on my restaurant to maintain independence from Greer's monopolized supply chains. If his influence succeeded, their livelihoods would shrink further. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through messages. A note from the union rep confirmed Greer's contracts extended through every supplier within a 100-mile radius, a tactic to isolate me legally and financially. I needed counter-evidence. Fast. The lab results were a ticking clock. If the samples didn't clear me, regulators had grounds to revoke my license. Greer had legal experts ready for the hearing. I had only my knowledge and community. I removed the samples and double-checked the chain of custody forms, each signed, time-stamped, and logged. No breaks, no errors. I photographed the documents again and emailed copies to my university contact requesting expedited confirmation. While waiting, I compiled purchase orders and supplier receipts to prove traceability. Every fish entering my kitchen was accounted for, each boat licensed and docked locally. I printed the documents and arranged them neatly on the table, the crisp papers rustling softly under my fingers. My phone buzzed, a notification about the City Council agenda for the upcoming public hearing. The letter and sample accusations would be central topics. A councillor in my network had offered limited support, but warned Greer lobbied regulators heavily. His legal team had already filed motions to restrict evidence admissibility, including barring independent testing. This was a chess game, each move by Greer aiming to corner me. The letter's reliance on an unverified lab report was the opening I needed. I called my contact at the university lab, confirming the report was preliminary and lacked peer review. Publicizing that fact could undermine Greer's narrative. Placing the phone down, the aroma of sea salt and fresh fish filled the air, sharpening my resolve. I would gather my own evidence, legally and thoroughly. I would not let Greer's contracts and influence suffocate a small business that had served this community for decades. Tomorrow, I would start contacting fishermen, securing statements and records. Time was short, 30 days until the renewal hearing, and the damage had already cost my restaurant $4,000 in weekly bookings. This was more than a business fight. It was a fight for the community's independence. And I was ready. The university genetics lab smelled faintly of bleach and cold metal. I traced my fingers along the laminated safety protocols near the main workstation as Dr. Harlan adjusted his glasses. Samples require $1,500 up front. Our liability insurance won't cover unapproved cases. His voice was steady but cautious. I nodded, pulling out an envelope of cash, fingers steady despite a tight budget. My supplier's samples don't match any I received, I said, sliding chain of custody forms across the table. I need definitive DNA barcoding. It's critical for the hearing in 29 days. Dr. Harlan glanced at the forms, lips pressed thin. Martin Greer's procurement director has been on us. They want us to stay out of this. Legal backlash risk if we go public. The lab's reluctance was expected. Greer's influence reached beyond fish markets, through exclusive contracts and regulators cowed by legal threats. A familiar weight settled on my shoulders. This setback meant more work, tighter funds, and higher risk. We can run the tests, but the lab won't distribute results publicly. You handle all communications, including press and regulators. A trap disguised as cooperation. I smiled, attempting to steady the knot tightening inside me. Agreed. I left with sealed samples and a USB containing QR-coded preliminary reports from the procurement director's internal audit. The files proved mismatches. Larvae labelled as cod were pollock. If leaked too soon, the data would be twisted to discredit me and the fishermen I support. Greer's legal team shadowed every move. I drove straight to the Fishermen's Cooperative Hall. The room carried a sharp mix of salt and diesel. "We're holding a blind tasting next week," I announced, scanning faces marked by years of toil and threatened reputations. If the supplier's claims fail, the proof will be beyond any lawyer's reach. One man, his skin leathery from sun and wind, nodded slowly. "Your fight's our fight. This is our best chance to expose the truth before the hearing," I said quietly. The clock ticked louder. 29 days down to the showdown steeped in law, influence, and desperation. Later, at my empty restaurant, I mapped out the tasting plan, cross-referencing staff, timing, and media contacts. Costs I could handle, but Greer's tightening grip felt like a noose. Every action had to count. No mistakes allowed. The lab's condition forced me to bear the public risk alone. Any slip could cost my restaurant's reputation. Or worse. Greer's hotline buzzed with threatening subpoenas and warnings, yet holding raw data meant I wasn't powerless. I reviewed the QC-coded reports again. The supplier's deception wasn't careless. It was calculated to crush local fishermen's independence. The hearing was no longer about fish. It was about control. I folded the documents neatly. Tomorrow, the tasting would begin the fight back. I would expose the truth myself, before Greer's legal team buried it forever. The pier market smelled of salt, diesel, and old fish, a briny mix carried on the sharp morning breeze. 5 captains clustered near the docks, their faces weathered by sun and sea. I counted 24 fishing boats tied along the pier, nets and gear stacked neatly, ready for tomorrow's haul. I straightened my sweat-dampened grey jacket, the fabric heavy against my skin. Martin Greer's influence was pervasive, his procurement director subtly pitching protection deals in hushed tones to captains. I needed those men on my side, but most feared retaliation worse than losing an entire fishing season. "Morning, Elias." I lifted a folder from my worn leather bag and stepped closer. His eyes flicked nervously to the others before he nodded. "You brought the test results?" His voice held the wariness of a man battered by rumors. "Yes. DNA barcoding confirmed mislabeling from Greer's supplier." I slid a printout across the table. "Notice these invoice numbers, out of sequence and duplicates. I need your help verifying them." A shadow crossed his face. "If word gets out, Greer's team won't hesitate to blacklist us or worse." His hand trembled slightly as he touched the folder. "I understand," I said, voice steady despite the knot tightening in my stomach. "But if we don't expose this, Greer's monopoly tightens, and your independence ends." A dry cough interrupted us. I turned to see Captain Marina clutching a folded envelope, her silver hair shimmering in the weak dock light. "I've been keeping records separate from Greer's system," she said quietly. "These are originals." She passed them over carefully, the worn paper revealing numbers matching anomalies in my folder. A hush fell over the group. I unfolded the documents, scanning line by line. The discrepancies, phantom shipments, forged signatures. This was undeniable proof. "But you risk everything by sharing this," I warned. Marina's eyes hardened. "I've lost too much already. Greer's deals cost more than money." Behind us, the procurement director appeared, his smile sharp and frozen. "Gentlemen, ladies." His voice was smooth but ironclad. "Consider the benefits of cooperating. Protection means regular work, fewer inspections." His words sliced through the captain's hesitance. I locked eyes with him, unflinching. "We're not asking for favors. We want transparency. Standing with Greer means endorsing fraud." A captain shifted uneasily. Tension thickened. I knew this moment could fracture trust or forge alliances. "We face Greer at the hearing in 27 days, I said. "This evidence is our leverage. Expose false invoices, dismantle his control." Elias glanced at Marina's originals, then at me. "If this leaks, we lose customers, jobs. But if it holds, we regain control." The cost hung silently between us, the risk of alienating those I must protect. Marina nodded. "We need this fight." Her hands steadied as she passed me another smaller envelope. "More copies. Keep them safe." Outside, a man in a fedora photographed our exchange. A reminder Greer's reach included surveillance. I slipped the documents into my bag, fingers steady despite exhaustion. "Tomorrow," I said, "we verify shipments with matched catches. I'll coordinate with the university lab for fresh samples. No angle left untouched." As the captains dispersed, their footsteps heavy with uncertainty, I watched saltwater lap against the hulls, the crisp air tingling with brine and promise. My silver hair felt sun-warmed and weighty, my skin taut from the wind. Greer's legal team would press regulators, challenge admissibility, intimidate witnesses. But with this evidence, the balance might shift. I had 18 hours before health inspectors returned. The hearing clock counted down. I carried a fragile hope, woven from risk, trust, and unyielding resolve. The cold metal door of the company warehouse pressed against my palm at exactly 10:23 a.m., while my breath formed a faint mist in the crisp early spring air. Through the narrow window set high on the door, I spotted 2 guards pacing steadily inside. Martin Greer's security was tighter than I'd anticipated. Signs in bold block letters read, "Authorized personnel only," accompanied by a red blinking security camera silently warning intruders. I scrutinized the delivery schedule taped to the door's side, a precise timetable of arrival and dispatch times. Trucks arrived every 2 hours, unloading seafood stock before departing. The guards' patrols aligned exactly with these deliveries, creating brief moments when their attention was divided. I waited for the morning delivery to engage their focus. As the driver exchanged papers with the warehouse manager inside, the guards turned their backs, distracted. Slipping into the narrow alley beside the building, I reached the rear parking area. A freight truck idled, its engine humming softly, driver absorbed in a phone call. The back delivery doors were slightly ajar, a rare lapse in Greer's fortress. The driver's conversation ended. Before he could step out, I slipped inside behind cargo resting on a pallet jack. Despite exhaustion gnawing at my limbs, my heart stayed steady as I moved cautiously, avoiding boxes stamped with Greer's supplier logos. Inside, the cold bit into my skin, still warmed by the morning sun, but my hands remained steady while pulling samples tagged for compliance. Experienced fingers detected mislabeled products by subtle texture and packaging inconsistencies. For every crate touched, every sealed bag photographed and tagged, I extended the necessary chain of custody for our upcoming hearing. Pausing near a pallet of cod shipments, I noticed barcodes clashed with supplier invoices I'd previously collected. Those notes detailed catches from a fleet Greer insisted was defunct. The University Genetic Lab's findings had confirmed a pattern of substitution in his supply chain. If I linked these samples directly to invoices and public records, Greer's monopoly might finally crack wide open. Suddenly, footsteps echoed, keys jingling outside the rear door. I slipped deeper into shadow, clutching my camera and chain of custody forms as the door swung open briefly. I slipped out unnoticed, breath heavy from hours on my feet. The delivery truck rumbled to life, the driver oblivious. Back in my car, I catalogued photos and notes. The evidence solidified. Physical samples matched by barcodes, validated invoices, and DNA results. My silver hair clung damp to my forehead. Though my skin was taut with fatigue, my hands remained steady with resolve. I texted Dr. Harlan, requesting expedited analysis on the new samples. Greer's counters had stiffened. His legal team pressured labs, and hired guards blocked access. Yet by adapting to routines and spotting overlooked details like delivery timing, I preserved crucial evidence. My restaurant's future depended on this. 24 days until the hearing. Each sample pried from Greer's grip brought us closer to exposing his fraud and protecting the fisherman's livelihood. The day's exhaustion was a fair price. Pulling my leather bag strap tighter, I started the engine. Tomorrow held more questions, but the edge was mine to wield. The pier thrummed with activity at noon as the taste test event drew a crowd. I wore my faded grey jacket, leather bag slung at my side, fingers tapping steadily on my phone screen. The public QR codes I had distributed linked hundreds to the full DNA barcoding results, exposing supplier fraud beyond doubt. Faces around me flickered between curiosity and disbelief as fishermen and local residents accessed the data on their screens. The salty tang of the sea mingled with diesel exhaust. Rough, weathered hands passed out sample plates. Martin Greer's name rippled through the crowd in hushed whispers. Earlier that morning, I received a terse email. He publicly denied all allegations and had filed suit, branding the event organizer vexatious. The legal threat added $5,000 to already mounting expenses. I felt my limited funds shrinking under relentless pressure. Worse still was the coercion. Greer's team had leaned on small captains to sabotage the event and quietly discredit my findings. I glanced toward Captain Elias near the docks. He avoided meeting my eyes, fingers clenched tight. Hours before, in a guarded tone, he had admitted, "They want us to walk away." Threats, whispers of blacklists. The silence of the captains was heavy. Months of economic dependence on Greer's contracts chained them more securely than iron. Yet then, Marina stepped forward, breaking the tension. "Enough hiding," Marina declared calmly, silver hair pulled back and eyes steely. She pressed a folder into my hands. "These are our original invoices. Cross-check them with your DNA results. The proof is here. We never lied." The crowd fell silent. Her gloved hands were steady like mine. "I'll testify," she said firmly. Others shifted nervously but nodded in support. I projected the QR-linked data onto a large screen, revealing verified mismatches, Fish labelled wild caught, traced to farms, swapped species, undermining claims of transparency. Journalists recorded every detail as Greer's denials began to crack. Amid the crowd's attention, my phone buzzed. Greer's lawyer threatened immediate injunction if the event didn't cease. Static crackled as I calmly declined. My voice stayed steady, despite exhaustion from sleepless nights. Strands of silver hair blew faintly in the sea breeze. By 2 p.m., a micro-twist emerged. Elias whispered urgently, "Some captains admitted to tampering with your samples, afraid of losing their contracts." I nodded slowly, tracing chain of custody forms. Sabotage confirmed, yet so was the courage of those standing with me. The legal battle intensified, but public sentiment shifted powerfully. Local fishermen voiced loud support, demanding independent audits. The hearing loomed in 21 days. My joints ached, strength waned. But every witness and document brought me closer to justice. The crowd's growing support was palpable, cameras capturing a turning point. Greer's grip faltering against community unity. I returned to monitoring QR log data, noting real-time spikes in access. Regulators would see this. A cold certainty settled deep. I carried not just evidence, but the hope for local independence. Between legal risks and financial strain, I steeled myself. The days ahead would test every ounce of resolve. As the sun dipped low, I packed the documents into my satchel, silver hair dusted by salt-tinged wind. Greer's moves no longer seemed invincible. The council hearing approached, but now the proof, the people. And I stood openly together. The public would decide if truth or power prevailed. The small boat dock smelled of salt, diesel, and damp wood at 8:45 a.m. 5 captains gathered along the pier's edge, their lined faces tight with resolve and worry. I held 5 signed delivery agreements, contracts to bypass Martin Greer's monopolized suppliers and deliver seafood directly. Each captain had agreed to cooperate, but tension thickened the air. 2 captains, once stalwart allies, now faltered. "Greer's legal team's breathing down our necks," Captain Reynolds muttered, eyes scanning the shoreline nervously. His hands gripped a folded invoice, creased from anxious handling. "They threaten contracts and fines. I'm thinking of pulling out." I nodded, steady beneath my sweat-dampened grey jacket. "Reynolds? Losing 2 might save many. The hearing's in 19 days. We hold firm until then." My fingers tightened around the chain of custody forms. "I can't shield you from every threat, but your signatures form a legal shield." Captain Marina, silver hair tucked under a worn cap, exhaled sharply. "We know the stakes. These direct routes keep us independent. Greer's grip tightens, drags us under." Her steady gaze locked with mine as her gloved hands rested on the weathered wood railing. "Lose any more. It's over." We moved along the docks, finalizing documents. I gathered her folded envelopes, the original invoices Greer's side couldn't replicate. 5 agreements now in hand. My phone buzzed. I opened a message from the local fisheries regulator. "Complaint investigation postponed. Pending impartiality review. No action for 14 days." The regulator's delay put Greer's complaint on hold, officially for unbiased proceedings. It bought my new suppliers temporary breathing room but exposed regulatory backdoor maneuvers. Greer's influence ran deeper than I'd feared. By noon, cracks appeared when 2 longtime suppliers withdrew public support. Captain Jensen joined them, scared after a formal letter warned of license suspension should he continue direct deals with me. The letter bore official seals. Greer's subtle legal intimidation. The loss cut deep, but momentum held. I left the docks, sitting on a creaking bench as sharp sea air brushed past. Weathered hands traced the contract's edges, steady despite joint aches. Earlier, I'd sent photos of the signed documents to Dr. Harlan, urging swift genetic testing of recent Hall samples. His cautious reply came by text. Progress, but no definite results. Time wasn't on our side. My phone rang. Greer's sharp voice sliced through. Laurel, you're stirring a hornet's nest. Pull these captains and we might drop the health inspection. Threats won't break us, I replied firmly. These agreements are lawful. I won't back down. Then expect more complaints. Regulators won't be so patient next time. The call ended. The cold calculus was clear. Every new supplier meant escalating legal pressure. I'd lost 2 who chose self-preservation over independence, but still held 5 committed captains ready to fight. The hearing in 19 days loomed large. I inhaled the briny air, feeling the cool dampness brush my damp hair at the nape. Our livelihoods hung on these fragile alliances, holding through Greer's legal storm. The regulator's delay was a pause before the next assault. No illusions. Greer's network would mobilize complaints, inspections, and filings relentlessly. I faced losses while forging footholds. But with 5 direct delivery agreements, I had carved a fresh supply chain, bypassing a monopoly choking us all. I rose, gripping my bag's leather strap. My gaze swept the harbor's restless waters. Each signature was a step toward clearing my restaurant and preserving the fishermen's independence I was sworn to protect. The fight wasn't over. It was intensifying. The county records office was cold. Fluorescent lights flickered overhead as I sat alone at a metal desk, wrists aching from hours of note-taking and scrolling through scanned files. My faded grey jacket was damp with sweat, and my hands trembled slightly, wear from the night before settling like a dull throb. Across the room, an official typed deliberately, his expression vacant, unfazed by my presence. My goal: track the procurement director's financial ties tied to Martin Greer's supplier monopoly. I navigated the public records terminal, sifting through billing statements and contract filings. Most documents were heavily redacted or inaccessible, blocked by recent regulatory constraints Greer's influence had secured. Each denied access felt like a wall crashing down, tightening his grip on the seafood pipeline. A digital footprint took shape. I found shell companies registered under vague addresses, but linked through recurring phone numbers to suspicious invoices submitted by the procurement director's office. The sums were inconsistent with legitimate supplies, raising alarm bells. I cross-referenced supplier names and dates, pinpointing overlaps with Greer's exclusive contracts. It was a pattern of manipulation, the ledger of a laundering network concealed within bureaucratic shadows. My phone buzzed in my pocket, a text from Marina. Original invoices ready, meeting tomorrow. I responded with a thumbs-up emoji, fingers too clumsy to type fast. Marina's support was one thread fraying Greer's control. But threats lingered. 5 captains had signed agreements to bypass Greer's suppliers, but 2 dropped out under legal pressure. Greer's procurement director had already filed fresh restraining complaints. Regulators delayed investigation, giving Greer's camp more time to maneuver. I leaned forward, eyes scanning lines of figures, when the terminal suddenly displayed a prompt I hadn't seen before. A hidden folder accessible for only moments under the current session. Without hesitation, I clicked through and found a digital ledger. Rows of transactions connected late-night wire transfers, offshore accounts, and falsified purchase orders. Every entry pointed back to the procurement director's network. The money trail was explicit. My fingers shook as I downloaded the ledger onto a USB drive, heart pounding despite years of steady resolve. This was the breakthrough I needed, the direct connection linking Greer's procurement chain to supplier fraud. But the risk rose. If discovered, physical retaliation or legal escalation could follow. The tension tightened in my shoulders, forcing me to lift my tired arms. A sudden noise startled me. A county security officer approached, eyes narrowing. "Records close in 10 minutes. I gathered papers, clicking off the screen. My leather bag was heavy with printed documents and that fragile USB. Proof that Greer's legal moves could not erase the truth. Exiting into the chill afternoon air, I felt the pressure sharpening. 15 days until the hearing. My body ached, but the fight for local fishermen's independence and my restaurant's survival demanded relentless moves. Each step forward risked exposure and injury, but I held the ledger tight, knowing this fragile evidence might turn tides against Martin Greer's ironclad monopoly. The local regulatory office smelled of old paperwork and acrid coffee. In a cramped corner cubicle, I sat across from Deputy Regulator Harper. His thin frame was tense, fingers tapping a rhythm on the scarred wood desk. The clock on the wall counted down. 10 days until the seasonal fishing license renewal hearing. "Your compiled evidence is substantial," Harper said, sliding a USB drive across the desk. "Offshore ledgers, false invoices, exclusive contracts favoring Greer's suppliers. These are serious." His eyes flicked to a printout beneath his palm. Martin Greer's latest barrage of complaints. But the political pressure keeps mounting. Procurement Director Keller has escalated his intimidation. Harper's phone buzzed. He concealed it, then nodded. "Keller's reminding me that any misstep could delay this indefinitely, or worse, jeopardize my position." I swallowed, the fatigue rising from hours of chasing documentation and long nights analyzing discrepancies. My voice remained steady. "Delaying means more captains fall back under Greer's monopoly. 3 steadfast captains agreed to bypass Greer despite his threats. We can't undo their courage." I leaned forward, dragging a printed chain of custody form toward him. "This is fully documented. Every transfer, every signature authenticated." Harper flicked through several color-coded spreadsheets and photos from my phone. "Some suppliers have already withdrawn following Keller's warnings. The risk is high." His gaze hardened. "Even the regulator's office faces cuts if Greer's camp succeeds." "Keller's threats won't silence the truth," I said. "But I'm exhausted. Weeks of stress have worn me thin. I'm not just fighting Greer's monopoly. I'm fighting the system he's co-opted." Harper nodded, voice lowering. "You should know. Privately, I support your cause. Once the proof is undeniable, I'll push for a partial freeze on Greer's exclusive supplier contracts. It's the only leverage we have now." He lowered his gaze to the USB again. "We'll launch an official investigation, starting today." A sudden knock interrupted us. The door creaked. An aide peeked in, whispering. Harper nodded, then glanced toward me. "Keller just filed a formal complaint against you to delay this hearing. He claims procedural irregularities. It's a countermove to buy Greer more time." "It's what I expected," I said. "I'll rise to the challenge." My hands tightened into fists under the desk. Muscle fatigue throbbed from the back of my neck. Harper's voice cracked. "This will test us both. Political tides run strong in Greer's favor, but your evidence, especially the offshore ledger and genetic tests pending from the university lab, could unravel their grip." "I sent Dr. Harlan's preliminary DNA report this morning," I said. "This week will be decisive." He flipped open a file. "The procurement director's lobbying runs deep. Campaign donations, friendly audits, backdoor meetings." I dug into public records. Keller's influence on regional councils is extensive. Your discovery of falsified purchase orders linked to Greer corroborates these findings. Then the regulator's delay is more than impartiality, I said. It's a firewall designed by Greer's network. Harper sighed. That's why the partial freeze is only temporary and conditional. If the final report is comprehensive, it'll be harder to stall. I took several deep breaths, steadying my years-worn lungs. I'll gather the remaining captain's declarations and confirm chain of custody updates before the hearing. The office phone rang, its sharp ring slicing the tense silence. Harper glanced at it, but ignored the call. Keller's push for a full rollback is underway. He's threatening compulsory audits for all Allied captains unless they reverse course. Pressure will grow exponentially, I said. But the fishermen's independence is vital to the community. Harper's expression darkened. The next week will decide if Greer's legal machine holds or breaks. I slipped the USB into my worn leather bag. Then this investigation starts today. No more delays. I stood, silver strands falling across weathered skin, steady despite exhaustion. Harper followed me to the door. "Keep steady," he said. "I'll shield you where I can." The fishing docks were slick with night rain, lights flickering across the empty piers. $8,000 in damage marked the spot where company enforcers had smashed 3 fishing boats and ripped nets from 2 more. I stood near Captain Marina's battered vessel, its hull scarred by deliberate strikes. Marina's gloved hands trembled as she counted rigging ropes, her steady eyes shadowed by rising fear. "Still no sign of who did this," she said. "But the patterns, targeted damage, staged to look like rival crews." She folded a crumpled invoice. "Procurement Director Keller's pushing the blame onto other captains, but that's thin." I clicked my camera, documenting every ruined engine part, crushed barrels, severed lines. The destruction was precise, measured to intimidate the fishermen cooperating with me against Greer's monopoly. Keller denied involvement when I confronted him by phone. His tone was sharp, clipped. "These accusations are baseless. Why would we sabotage our own supply?" Yet his message promoted rumors aimed at fracturing our network. I slid a printed copy of Marina's original invoices into my leather bag alongside my phone. The digital ledger I downloaded days earlier showed payments from Greer's shell companies funneling through Keller's department. His refusal to resign after the sabotage, coupled with shadows cast on rival captains, confirmed his readiness to escalate violence. I pulled out my phone just as a pinned message appeared, an anonymous tip. The text read, "Check the North Dock area tonight. Evidence you need." The contact was new, untraceable. I hesitated, exhaustion creeping from days packed with investigations and meetings. My weathered hands tightened around the phone. At 2:15 a.m., I moved toward the North Dock, boots splashing through shallow pools. A faint orange glow flickered behind a storage container. There, taped beneath a rusted railing, I found a weatherproof USB drive. My fingers traced the cold metal, steady despite the chill. I immediately compiled a chain of custody record on my phone, photographing the location and damp surroundings. Losing this evidence would be critical. Back at my truck, I uploaded the contents. The files revealed time-stamped video footage of the sabotage, multiple angles captured by hidden cameras, faces blurred, but hands in dark gloves wielding crowbars were unmistakable. The timestamps matched last night's schedule of broken engines and slashed nets. I copied the data securely and sent an encrypted message to Deputy Regulator Harper, ensuring no delay in the investigation. Keller's denial now hung on the precipice of exposure. Greer's legal team would intensify tactics, But the whistleblower's timing gave me leverage. Even so, the damaged boats had fishermen second-guessing reinforcements. Captain Elias worried aloud about reprisals if we pressed the advantage. I answered calmly. We document and report. We don't react with force. The delicate negotiation for trust persisted. My silver hair and steady fingers showed experience, but the drain of physical limits pressed inward. The fishing license hearing was 7 days away. Every moment counted. The new evidence complicated the field. Keller's attempts to frame rival captains faltered under video proof. Now, I had to protect the fishermen and preserve the fragile alliance. Clear documentation and careful steps were the only weapons against Greer's escalating pressure. The anonymous tip gave me a foothold. My next move had to be precise, calculated. I secured my jacket against the damp air and watched as dawn threatened the horizon. The fight to clear my restaurant's name and save the fishermen's independence was no longer abstract. It was immediate, costly, and dangerously close. I sat in the cramped hearing room, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. My fingers tightened around chain of custody forms. My sweat-dampened grey jacket clung to my skin. 2 hours earlier, Procurement Director Keller had filed an injunction to stall the license renewal hearing, citing procedural irregularities in my evidence submissions. The hearing clock ticked down. Only 48 hours to the decision. My worn apron hung folded on the chair beside me. The room smelled faintly of paper and stale coffee, while exhaustion pressed against my vision, blurring its edges. $20,000 in legal fees had drained my small reserves. Still, I refused to falter. Keller's latest move wasn't just a delay, it was an all-out public relations assault. Posters had popped up downtown, implying my seafood was tainted and my fishermen unreliable. The campaign twisted facts from Greer's exclusive supplier contracts, aiming to isolate me and fracture community support. I'd heard the murmurs in the market. Greer's iron grip tightened. But this time, I had countermeasures. I handed the judge fresh affidavits signed by Captains Marina, Elias, and Reynolds. Each described sabotage, unsanctioned inspections, and illegal payments routed through shell companies covering Keller's tracks. Marina's letter detailed destroyed nets and rigged equipment on her vessel. Elias attached suspicious invoices showing money diverted offshore. Reynolds included an email trail challenging Keller's narrative. The documents landed like stones in the courtroom. Outside the hearing room, Deputy Regulator Harper approached in a sharp suit, voice low but clear. Laurel, we've uncovered corrupt invoices linking Greer's shell companies directly to Keller's offshore accounts. This validates your evidence. The Commission will freeze Greer's supplier licenses pending a full audit. It's unprecedented, he said, scanning the tense room as if guarding a secret. The hearing paused. Surprise rippled through Greer's lawyers. Keller's frozen smile vanished. This bought critical time, the legal breathing room I desperately needed. I flipped open my phone. Pictures from the North Dock showed boats damaged in targeted sabotage, just as Marina described. Video clips from the whistleblower's USB played on the screen, capturing Keller's men inspecting vessels under false pretenses. I dispatched reports to regulators' officers, following strict chain of custody protocols, ensuring evidence integrity. Keller addressed the panel next, his voice steady but strained. He denied all accusations, branded my affidavits fabricated, and called for dismissal. But Greer's network was cracking under the weight of transparent documentation. Minutes later, Keller's PR campaign faltered as the affidavits circulated among local press and fishermen's unions. Community leaders rallied behind me. Even hesitant captains stepped forward, confirming the pattern of intimidation. Behind my calm facade, my weathered hands trembled slightly. Physical exhaustion bore heavily, but I tucked my loose silver hair behind an ear. The cost of this fight was etched into my taut skin. Yet I smiled briefly. Steady fingers clasped the delivered proof, sealing months of labor into a decisive moment. The judge set a firm deadline. The fishing license renewal was frozen pending further audits. Legal hurdles remained, but the freeze stalled Greer's monopolist advance and Keller's sabotage. It was the breakthrough I needed. The regulator's uncovering of Keller's offshore accounts confirmed the link tying Greer's shell companies to coordinated obstruction. I gathered myself to submit the final batches of testimony. Each affidavit, photo, and ledger page bore weight. They became a tangible shield for local fishermen's independence. The clock still counted down, but for the first time since this battle began, I saw a path forward. No illusions, Keller and Greer would press on. But today was mine. The morning rush at the Honest Catch was noticeably slower than before reopening. Cautious eyes scanned the updated menu, spotlighting fresh seafood from independent fishers, while orders came in carefully measured. Behind the counter, I wiped a glass steady-handed, the faint, briny aroma of salt and sea air filling the kitchen, but tension simmering beneath my calm exterior. Customers lingered longer than usual, exchanging quiet glances, undeterred by Greer's looming shadow over the local fishery. Despite the familiar scent of fresh brine and salt, revenue lingered 40% below the previous season's baseline. The procurement director's red inspection notice still weighed heavily in my thoughts. I had sent DNA samples from my latest catches and his warehouse stock to Dr. Harlan's lab, awaiting confirmation to disprove Greer's damaging insinuations. The clock was ticking. 30 days remained until the fishing license hearing. 30 days to secure the restaurant's survival. Mid-afternoon, Deputy Regulator Harper called. Her voice was clear, but tight. "Laurel, corruption charges have been filed against Keller," she revealed. "The procurement director lost his position this morning." She paused briefly. "Your evidence triggered a full audit of Greer's supplier licenses." I set down the order pad, fingers tightening. Keller's calm denials crumbled beneath the weight of recorded transactions I had handed Harper weeks prior. Behind his impassive facade, an offshore network funneled Greer's profits through shell companies tied to Keller's anonymous accounts. The proof was hidden in plain sight. Carefully logged invoices, bank transfers, and sabotage footage I maintained meticulously in the chain of custody forms. Harper added, "Reports show his office received $275,000 in payments during the past 6 months from Greer's affiliates. We're freezing those licenses pending a full investigation." When the call ended, a cautious swell of hope rose amid my exhaustion. Hours later, local restaurateurs and fishermen gathered in the dimly lit dining room. Captain Marina unfolded original invoices she had secretly kept, the silver strands in her hair catching the low light. Others brought envelopes and receipts, hesitant but determined. Trust, once fragile and fractured, began to re-knit itself across the battered community. Suddenly, my phone buzzed with a message from Captain Elias. "Laurel, the cooperative's official. We meet tomorrow to form a shared supplier group anchored around your restaurant." The note snapped the room's tension into a fragile sense of purpose. Cooperation, not competition, was now our center. Yet the shift carried sharp edges. Greer's legal team promptly filed motions to reopen injunctions, targeting regulatory delays and launching public relations attacks. Their new stance accused the cooperative of disrupting existing contracts and violating city codes. Pressure tightened like a noose around us. I glanced at my worn apron in the cracked mirror behind the bar. damp with sweat from the day's strain. Each step forward was a negotiation between fatigue and restrictive rules. This fight was no longer solely for my restaurant, but for the future of the entire local fishing economy. Late that night, I updated my chain of custody binders, photos, invoices, affidavits, the campaign's paper veins. Though traces of Greer's tightening noose remained, the regulator's action had peeled back his control, exposing Keller's offshore scheming. The license freeze was a rare victory, a moment's reprieve. Looking up, I traced the cracked ceiling's rough texture as the distant hum of waves drifting through an open window filled the room. The next 30 days would demand everything. The tide was turning, but Greer's lethal grip persisted, hurling legal assaults like relentless waves battering a fragile hull. Tomorrow's cooperative meeting would begin the next chapter. Until then, I allowed myself a steady breath and a warm smile for the few faithful at the tables, a fragile flicker holding fast against the storm.